Cooper has strung us along for months, suggesting that she was working on ways to help us. However, all she has done is remove the possibility of us being included in the Southport inquiry.
It was back on the 15th of October 2021 that Sir David Amess, the MP for Southend West, was stabbed to death as he carried out a constituency surgery at a church in Leigh-on-Sea. It was later revealed that the killer, Ali Harbi Ali, had been referred to the counter-terrorism programme Prevent before the attack, but that his case had been closed. Kamal, you and I knew that the Ames family were going to put together this press conference where they wanted to lobby the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and ultimately the Prime Minister Keir Starmer to hold a public inquiry into Sir David's death in the vein of the two inquiries that have been announced into the Southport killings and indeed the Nottingham murders by Valdo Callacane, both of which we have covered on the Daily Tea. So we arrive at 15 Great College Street in Westminster, about to hear very emotive testimony from David Amess's daughter, Katie, who has been front and centre of this campaign. Sir David Amess and his wife, Julia, have 5 children, but it's Katie that has taken this up on behalf of the family. And as we're sitting there waiting for her to speak, it suddenly pops up on the Press Association newswire that Yvette Cooper has decided that there won't be a public inquiry, even though she hasn't yet met with the family, along with the Prime Minister. That's due to happen on Wednesday. So we sit there and we get this news that the press conference that is calling for a public inquiry has already been sort of debunked. Okay? So I could just see, I'm seeing this scene unfold. We've got Katie Amess there steeling herself to give what was one of the most emotionally charged and genuinely heartfelt and heartbreaking statements by a member of family caught up in a murder that I've ever witnessed. And they know that the Home Secretary has rejected this plea. And it's a press conference this morning fueled by emotion, but my goodness, also so much anger as that news broke. But let's just hear the moment that Katie Amess really lays bare what a catastrophically devastating effect her father's murder has had on her life.
Losing my father has stolen so much from us. In the weeks before his murder, he was helping me to plan my wedding, a day he had looked forward to more than anything. It was his absolute dream to walk one of his children down the aisle at the crypt at the Houses of Parliament, and we were just 6 weeks away from that dream. He had planned everything, from the flowers to the music. He had even planned a surprise photo shoot where my husband was going to wear the same suit that my dad had worn to marry my mum all those years before. He was so excited and was telling everyone just how amazing the wedding was going to be. In his bag, on the day that it happened to him, when the police handed his bag back, I found a notebook with all of his plans in it for the wedding. They included a surprise stilt walker, a Eurovision Song Contest participant, and a horse and carriage. Whether I wanted these things at my wedding or not, I was going to have them. He had just picked out the suit he was going to wear to walk me down the aisle in. Instead of wearing it on my wedding day, that is the suit that we buried him in. I will never forget seeing that suit hanging up, waiting to be put on his cold, dead body. His shoes, his socks.
And I think we get a sense of the anger that produced in Katie Amess when she then speaks almost directly to the Home Secretary Yvette Cooper and the Prime Minister Keir Starmer.
Yvette Cooper has strung us along for months, suggesting that she was working on ways to help us. However, all she has done is remove the possibility of us being included in the Southport inquiry. Instead, she had offered us another useless paper review done by a person of their choosing. This appears to be an attempt to placate me and to make me go away. But I do not accept that. Our time has been wasted and it has caused further pain and heartbreak by giving us a small glimmer of hope only to crush it. The refusal to hold a public inquiry only adds to our suffering, and it makes us feel abandoned, ignored, and disposable. The government has a duty to protect citizens and those who serve the public. My father was failed in the worst way imaginable, and yet those responsible refuse to be held accountable. The actions of the government have left us in about £30,000 worth of debt, and this should never have been necessary. If they are hoping that my resources and that my grit will run out, it won't. And I will keep coming back time and time again until I get the justice that my father deserves. To Keir Starmer and Yvette Cooper, who we are meeting on Wednesday, I say this: do not let my father's murder be forgotten. Do not let his death be just another statistic. On Wednesday, when we meet with you, we will be asking you to reconsider this appalling decision. The reviews and the reports that have been written so far just do not hold water, and if anything, they raise more questions than answers. Please give us the public inquiry and the answers that we in the public need. Give us the justice that we deserve. You both claim to have been his friend. You were both at his funeral. Well, as his friend, his colleague, and as a human being, please do the right thing by him.
And we also heard this morning from Lady Julia Amess releasing a statement about her husband of 38 years' murder for the first time, Kamal. And the theme was very much in line with what Katie was saying there. But my overriding thought, as they both said that the previous Tory government hadn't helped and the subsequent Labour government hadn't helped, and Katie herself said, I'm sitting alone here. I don't have any MPs on either side of the House supporting me. And I thought, my goodness me, this is one of your own. This was an elected representative, a public servant, attacked literally as he was working to help constituents. And so I later sat down with Katie and we discussed not only why she was continuing this valiant fight, but also to explain that link between her father's murder and the Southport killings. Katie, you've just given the most extraordinarily powerful press conference downstairs. You've spoken so movingly. You're doing all this on behalf of yourself, but 4 siblings, your mother, Lady Amess. Where are you getting the strength from? Because I watched you and I just thought you are absolutely going into fight for your dad, but it must be incredibly difficult to be doing that while processing the grief that you're feeling.
Yeah, it's just, I don't know where I'm getting the strength from. I mean, I hate public speaking. I just get really nervous, but I feel like God and my dad are driving me on, because I just think if this had happened to me, my dad would not rest until he knew that he had done everything he could to hold people accountable and to get answers. So when I'm feeling weak or feeling self-doubt, I just pray to God and my dad, and they give me the strength to carry on.
And the quest for the public inquiry, we've heard today that Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary, has said no to that. You're going to go into Downing Street on Wednesday and make that plea. Why is it so important to you and your family that this is further investigated?
Well, I mean, it wasn't just a random act. He wasn't just walking down the street and somebody killed him. It was pre-planned, and he was meant to be being monitored and being followed, and he was known to the authorities, and they took him to McDonald's, bought him a cup of coffee. He said, I'm not a terrorist, and they let him go. That cannot be the way that we foil terrorist attacks in England. And to me, it's just beyond stupidity that they're thinking that this paper review, where in the paper review, by the way, they didn't interview one person to do with this. They just looked at email logs and, you know, a sequence of timelines and then did the review from that. That is not an investigation. They just want to put a plaster on things and make me go away. And if I do that, then my dad died for nothing, because it's going to happen to other people. And we see about one terrorist attack a year. And it's the same thing over and over with Prevent failing. So somebody has to stand up and say, absolutely not. We need to figure this out. What's going wrong? Hold people accountable. So I guess it's going to be me.
And in that paper review, we hear that phrase that we've heard so often, lessons will be learned. And then actually following that paper review, Southport happens.
Yeah. So they were trying to say all the questions have been answered through that review. And I said, well, then why did 3 beautiful little children die? Because of the negligence of Prevent again. So nothing has been sorted out, unless they're saying since Southport happened, everything has been sorted out. But that review was done years before. So it's just words, because they don't want their failings and their shortcomings to be made public. But somebody has to stand up and hold them accountable, and they want me to go away, but I'm not going to.
And when you say they, yes, you're talking about the authorities, but you're also talking about Essex Police.
Yes.
Just explain what happened the day before your father was murdered. A phone call was received by your brother.
Yes, and they said that something bad was going to happen to my dad. And subsequently, it turned out the threat was not related, but I'm not saying it was related. What I'm saying is that if you have a threat to a standing member of parliament, it's not rocket science. You should go to his surgery the next day and send protection. And the police keep saying, well, it's not our policy to send protection. But there was a threat, so that needs to be your policy. The guy that did it admitted that he went to other surgeries with his weapon, saw police presence and turned around. So why did those other police departments have it in their budget to send protection? And why not for my dad? And there was a threat to me during the trial. And the person that made the threat went to the wrong house. It was like 3 doors along. But obviously, he knew the vicinity that I lived in. The police didn't even come and tell me that there had been a threat against me. It was the neighbours that called and said, stay put. The police will be on their way. And we never ever saw them or heard from them again.
So you obviously want that to be investigated
Absolutely.
as part of any inquiry.
Yeah.
And then you've spoken very eloquently this morning about why your father was an MP, that he was in it for public service. He wasn't a careerist. He was there to represent his constituents. And what this case has laid bare is the vulnerability of our elected representatives when they're holding these kind of MP surgeries. At the moment, as it stands, do you think MPs are safe?
Well, my father was murdered during his constituency surgery, and the guy just walked in and was able to do it. So that leads me to believe no. And the fact that nobody will even investigate why that happened also leads me to believe no. So I don't understand why more MPs aren't standing up and saying, yeah, we support you. What can we do to help you?
Why do you think they're not standing up? What are they afraid of?
There's obviously something in this that they don't want coming out. Because what the Conservatives wouldn't help me. So I thought, well, when the Labour government gets in, they'll help me. Now the Labour government won't help me. There's something in this that they don't want coming out. And if it wasn't for the journalists and the public, I would be the square root of nowhere by now. At least people are getting involved and asking the same questions.
Your life and your family's lives have been completely shattered since the events of October the 15th, 2021. This is taking an enormous amount of effort from you. It's taking up an enormous amount of emotion. But I'm getting the impression from you this morning, Katie, that you're not going to give up on this.
No, I'm not going anywhere. And I'm not going to go away until I get the answers that I need. It might take me the rest of my life, but if that's what I have to spend my life doing, that is what I'm going to do.
Look, we wish you all the very best for your meeting on Wednesday. And thank you very,
you.
very much indeed for talking to us on the Daily Tea today. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, your question there, Camilla, about have lessons ever really been learned? I think you and I, this podcast has been going less than a year, and we have covered things like Valdo Calacane, the Southport murders, the endless inquiries that say, oh, yes, this was a problem, and oh, yes, this was a problem. And it isn't true that lessons are learned. I did look at some of the coverage of the announcement by Yvette Cooper, and interestingly, some of the families involved in the Hillsborough tragedy and then the inquiry that eventually followed from that said, "Keep brave, Katie. We were turned down time and time and time again." But then, Camilla, you made the very good point when we were chatting just before we started recording, that at least the Hillsborough families had political support. So I think our question to members of parliament and politicians is, hang on a minute, you need to step up. I was also reminded of the Usman Khan, the London Bridge murderer case, because, again, Usman Khan, clearly he had been found guilty of terrorism offences, was then released, and then the system failed to protect the public from him because they believed he had been reformed in some way. And very similar for Harbi Ali, the murderer of David Amess, he went into the prevent system, and the system believed that, oh, maybe he had been, this appalling word, deconflicted, and also he got lost in the sort of cracks of the system. And Camilla, I read this morning the Prevent Learning Review, this sort of desktop review. What are the things that it misses completely, which we have raised again and again? Not one name is held accountable as having made a mistake. Lessons will only be learned if within organizations you realize that when someone makes a mistake or doesn't follow up something or something falls between the facts, you're going to be held accountable, and there's a high degree of chance that you will lose your job, because that wakes people up and leads to institutional change. But you read this Prevent Learning Review about all these lessons, and it was another thing we brought up, wasn't it, around inquiry reports. They are so verbose. The language is almost impossible to cover. So we've heard the emotion of David Amess there. You read the Prevent Learning Review, and it's as if civil servants are talking about an engineering project that went a bit wrong about building a bridge. There is no humanity in it. And I'm just going to read out a little bit of how it must feel to the Ames family reading about this totally cold analysis. And it just says at this sort of, at one stage in the report, at the moment, there is a disconnect between the work of the panels, the support panels, and the VAF. Whilst this review is undertaken, an interim consideration could be to look at pooling best practice in terms of CTP training in relation to the DIF and Home Office training relating to the VAF. If proposed changes by the College of Policing were in place when this review was commissioned, there would, in theory, have been no material to review. The proposed linkage of CM15 and PCMT, in which the possible data, and on it goes.
It's actually
Camilla.
insulting.
Yeah, it is. You read it, and it is where bureaucracy, and I think this is bleeds into the Home Office and Yvette Cooper, bureaucracy forgets. More than that, deliberately ignores the fact that in the end, everything is about people. Everything is about constituents, voters, young people, old people. And the only reason that bureaucracies are there, the only reason that politicians are there, is because people matter. You have to always speak in this certain knowledge. In a situation like this, that David Amess's family would have to read that about the murder of a much-loved husband, father, and constituency MP. I find it astonishing that they are so unable to.
They also said that the letters that they've received from the government lawyers are completely impersonal, demeaning, insulting. I mean, literally offensive. And she made the wider point, just to conclude, Katie, that first of all, I mean, the clues in the name, prevent. She said, my father's death was completely preventable. She also spoke there in the interview with me about some of the deficiencies of the Essex police, who she's taking on separately, by the way. But his death was completely preventable, but it's not just about him having been killed as an MP, as an elected representative. She said that this was an assault on democracy itself, because she makes the wider point. Are we just meant to be baking in the idea that the people that we vote to represent us can just be stabbed to death when they try and meet their voters out in public. This is the wider ramification of all this. But look, we'll be following this story. And I just do want to pay tribute to Katie Amess, because she's met with a sort of a phalanx of photographers and cameras and journalists like me. And she absolutely socked it to them. So all credit to her. And we will, of course, be following this case and I think supporting her in her quest for justice for her father.
And we, Camilla, we have been round these houses too many times already. We will be returning and keeping a spotlight on those people who have been victims of such appalling horrors and then have to fight institutions to get to justice.